y'all, it is the Hella Real Show, back again. If you can't tell, this is going to be our election episode. Red, white, blue. You know,
so patriotic.
We are hella patriotic.
You happy, Trump? Don't forget your name.
Yes, I'm Kayla Joe.
I'm Katrina.
And I'm Gio. And this is the Hella Real Show.
Yes, so talking politics, that means we need some alcohol.
Yes, please.
So we have G Eazy's liquor here today. Stillhouse Whiskey. Look at the bottle, y'all.
Whiskey's my favorite. It's a nice bottle.
It is.
And it's the lowest in calories of all the liquors.
Oh.
Organic too?
And we should eat more tacos.
You know why? Because he's from Berkeley. You know he's gonna have some organic stuff.
Okay, so let's take a pour.
So will you do the honors,
Gio won't kill us.
Unfortunately. You can pour a little more from my cup, please. Thank you.
I want more than you, but less than her.
Okay,
That's a shot. Like, you know how I...
Clear?
Yeah, I'm like confused. Yeah.
It's clear.
It's clear. I was like, I thought this was whiskey.
I've never had a clear whiskey, y'all.
You're intriguing us already.
This is the first.
Okay.
It's gonna be very interesting.
Yes.
Never had a clear whiskey.
Cheers, y'all.
Cheers. Eye contact.
Very
important. People doing it. Literally.
Oh. Wow.
I like
Good. This is hella
it.
smooth.
Really is.
It's dangerous.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's
Because
like
I'm not a
water.
whiskey fan, but this is good.
It reminds me of like a tequila.
It does. It has a little. It tastes like a little
lime-ish,
or lemon
like
taste.
citrusy.
It's good.
Okay, G Eazy. We see you.
Thank you, G Eazy. That was
Yes.
popping.
Cheers to you.
We'll keep buying this as well.
Yes. Another one for the collection. We're gonna have a Bay Area wine. I mean, not wine, liquor cabinet.
That means all of y'all need to get on the show.
Yeah. Aisha Curry, you next with your wine.
Oh, that's right.
Okay,
There you
she
go.
is having the wine. All right, girl.
Yeah.
The food
And we're
and
gonna get the house
everything.
with their wine.
Oh yeah.
We're just gonna put it out into the future, to the universe.
So as I said, this was our political election episode. We got our drinks, so I think
We don't have the answer, Sway.
Yeah.
We don't know. But we know somebody who does. So please welcome to the show, PJ Johnston.
Hello, ladies. How are you?
good.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, do you want some whiskey? G
Of
Eazy's
course.
whiskey.
Yes.
Have you ever had a clear whiskey?
I'm trying to think. I've had hooch. I've had
Like moonshine?
like moonshine. I don't know if I've had a clear whiskey, but it looks like I'm about to.
surprised. I didn't know it was gonna be.
We were all just stuck.
And it looks like it's coming out of an oil can. So. No, that's good.
Okay.
I will try it. Interesting. It's got a nice taste. It's interesting because when you smell it first, it smells a little like tequila, even though it's whiskey.
That's exactly what we said.
Yeah, but then it goes down a little more like whiskey. All right, I like it. I might get used to it.
You heard that. You got another fan, G Eazy.
One more little taste.
Okay, so why don't you tell our viewers who you are, why you qualified to tell us about all these measures that we're going to have to vote on?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm qualified, but I am willing. How about that?
More
I'm willing.
qualified than us.
Yes, yeah.
I do work in politics. For the last couple of decades or more, I have been a San Francisco political consultant and communications consultant. And so I work on campaigns, and I work with businesses, and I work with nonprofits on political issues and issues of importance to voters and to cities in particular, particularly the city of San Francisco, which is my home base. And
It's our
I've
home
been-
base too, the city.
and I've been involved with the last 4 or 5 mayors of San Francisco, starting with Mayor Willie Brown. I was his press secretary and got my start in politics with him. I used to be a reporter before that. And the last several mayors have been excellent mayors of San Francisco, and it keeps me busy. And I'm very, very proud of the fact that I was the campaign chairperson for Mayor London Breed, the new mayor of San Francisco. And so I'm particularly proud of that fact. She's our new mayor. She's only been in office for about 4 months, and we're really excited about all the things she can do.
Okay, so in California we have, what, is it 11 measures?
I think we have 12 ballot measures this year.
12
Yeah.
I think 9 got taken out. So can you explain to us what they mean? What does a yes vote mean? What does a no vote mean? And what would someone who helped get a London Breed elected vote?
Okay. Well, I'll preface it with a couple of things. First of all, it's confusing, right? The fact is, you've got 12 ballot measures on the state ballot. We have at least a dozen, sometimes more, every single election cycle. And it's confusing to the average voter because you're trying to pay attention to who to vote for governor, who to vote for your congressperson, who to vote for your local mayor and other positions. And then you get all these issues measures and you see all these television ads that can be confusing and sometimes contradictory. So it's tough on the average voter. So there's 12 of them on the ballot. So I kind of approach these things in a couple of ways. I typically am attracted to and lean yes for school bonds and other bonds that look like it is the state putting money into infrastructure that you know where it's going. That's usually a pretty good thing.
Right,
It
and
also,
you actually see the construction.
exactly.
Yeah, and then you
And
actually
it
like,
usually,
oh, there it is.
those actually usually go through the state legislature to make it onto the ballot. So those typically are good things. If they are what feel like really narrow issues, like why are we voting on should Mercury car insurance be able to charge this or that? I'm always skeptical of those and lean no, at least until I learn more about them. And there's at least one on this list this year that goes into that. Now the other way that I approach these things is the best way to prepare yourself to vote on ballot measures in particular, local and state measures, is to take your voter guide that comes in the mail and read it. And it's kind of long, but it gets all the stuff in there that you need to know about it. And I recommend to everybody that they hang on to this. If they get a chance, go through it before you go into the ballot booth and mark sort of what you're thinking ahead of time so you know what you're doing when you go in there. If you don't have the time to do that on all those measures, my second recommendation is to get your local newspaper. In my case, it's the San Francisco Chronicle. San Francisco Chronicle gives recommendations, as do every other newspaper in the state of California, on these ballot measures. And it's not that you need to take someone else's opinion and absolutely just vote that same way, but there's a couple of things about most newspapers in California. Most of them are pretty progressive. I mean, they're concerned about issues of importance to poor people, to sick people, to elderly people. They mostly look out for the good of society. And secondly, they're skeptical. So if they see something that just doesn't make sense, even if it appeals to all those groups we just talked about, they can be tough on them. So I recommend looking at your local newspaper wherever you're from.
Third choice, the Hella Real Show.
Third choice, the Hella Real Show.
If you're watching us right now, that's your third.
So we can go through these, and I'll go through them quickly, and you guys can tell me if you want to spend a little more time on any of them.
Okay.
Proposition 1 on the state ballot is a $4 billion bond, a state bond measure that basically raises money to build housing. It's not a perfect measure, but it puts $3 billion behind the construction and preservation of rental housing. So we need a lot of housing for people who rent, because not everybody can afford to buy, particularly in places like the Bay Area,
we
or
know
in
that.
Silicon Valley, and I imagine even in Southern California that's true. It also creates $1 billion for loans for veterans to buy homes and to buy farms. Veterans are a reliable group that when they get investments, they tend to make good on them. And so it's a good measure. I recommend voting yes on that. Number 2, it is basically a policy measure that permits money that the state of California already spends to house homeless mentally ill. So in other words, not just hospitalize, not just treat, but to also house mentally ill. It's a good idea because homelessness or the lack of affordable housing or just the threat of being on the streets is a big contributor to people's mental health problems.
Right.
So that's also
You're
a good
worried
measure.
you're only one paycheck away from homelessness.
That can
then
cause all
Exactly.
At least you know you have something to fall back on.
Exactly. So number 3 is water bonds. And every few years we see water bonds, sometimes more frequently than that basically keeps funding the state's water delivery system, which is really important for a number of reasons. The state of California is the largest state in population in the union, and most of the water is in the north, and most of the people are in the south. And people fight over how to get the money there. But one thing we always need to do is constantly fix those pipes, fix those dams, fix those pumps, and basically help keep the system running smoothly. Vitally important, so that's a strong yes. Number 4 is a children's hospital bonds. What this does is provide state money and leverages state money through the bonds to create even more state money to fund children's hospitals around the state of California, like Children's Hospital of Oakland and other places in the state, which tend to operate not always at a loss, but often at a loss or less money and less profit than other nonprofit hospitals and privately run hospitals in the state of California, because they provide services to children and their families at or below cost. And sometimes for free. And so they mostly serve poor people. They need the extra help from the state, and so I recommend a yes on that as well. Number 5, Proposition 5 is a property tax change, which allows people over the age of 55, if they move from one county to another, to try and protect their low Prop 13 mandated property taxes. It's not a good idea, because typically what it does, it benefits people who have money. If you have the money to protect when you're moving from one county to another against higher property taxes, which are relatively low incrementally anyway, that means you're already doing fantastically well. It's an unnecessary thing. It's too complicated to put before voters. I recommend no on number 5. Number 6 is an even worse idea. Prop 6 is a repeal of the state gas tax. Now, the state gas tax was passed through years and years of fighting at the state legislature to try and promote first a reduction in gasoline consumption, to try and get people to use their cars less, or at least look to higher mileage gasoline cars and hybrids and other things, and also to get vehicle makers, car makers, to increase their mileage standards. It ultimately was created to improve the roads. Cars and trucks are the main reasons why roads break down and you get potholes and highways are in tough shape. California has more cars on the roads than any other state in the union.
We actually saw a study recently. It was like, what are the top worst streets in the country?
That's right.
San Francisco and LA were the top.
It was San Francisco, which I think they attached Oakland to it. Then it was Los Angeles.
It was like the Bay
and
Area.
San Jose was number 3.
So
There's always construction, and it's still the worst, and it never gets done.
So what this would do would be to create a giant hole in the budget that fixes roads, that makes it work. And it would also be, honestly, the way it usually plays out is the tax would be removed from your gasoline, but your gasoline prices wouldn't necessarily go down, because what they might just have happen is that Exxon and Chevron and Shell and everywhere else, they'll keep the gasoline prices stable and they'll just pocket the difference. And so it's a bad idea. Proposition 6 would really mess up the state of California. No on Proposition 6.
No.
We need to fix the road. My tires say no.
Exactly, and what that's another thing is people who have lower priced cars, who don't have as much money to put into high performance vehicles, high performance tires, get disproportionately hurt by poor roads. Okay, number 7 is kind of a weird one. It is a measure that would direct the state of California to get off the daylight savings time standard that the rest of the country is, but it doesn't require it to do that. It seems like a bizarre thing to put on the state ballot measure. If there are benefits or disadvantages to having one or the other, it's probably something that the state legislature should work out. And beyond that, I don't know that the state of California should be off of what the rest of the country is. So I recommend no. I don't feel particularly strongly about it, however.
Do
you know the reason why they even
There-
that opposed that
There's some people who really believe in this issue that daylight savings time is somehow harmful and ought to be repealed, and they go state by state to try and repeal it. I'm not sure what they're smoking or why they think it's such a big deal. And you know, I could be convinced, but I'm not convinced yet.
Right. I mean, I like in the summer when it's like light until 9
Yeah.
o'clock.
Yeah.
And you have like more time to like.
All right, so number 8 is an interesting one. Number
That's the one I see all the commercials
Yeah.
about.
So there's a lot of
right?
money
Like,
in
none of
8,
them make
and,
sense.
and this is the one I was going to talk about, being when something seems so narrow, like why are we voting specifically about dialysis treatment clinics?
Oh, that's the one I
right?
keep hearing about.
Yeah,
And it's
the
all over the
commercials
news,
like,
and
I'm
you
gonna
can see
die.
there's a
Like,
you
whoa.
can see there's a lot of money in it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the way to look at it is this. There was a big battle between the dialysis clinics and the union that services them. And my understanding is that the upshot is that when union negotiations broke down on the contracts that the workers in these clinics were seeking, their way to fight back was to put this ballot measure on the ballot that would force some of the things that they want. The problem is it's complicated and it is narrow. So that's not a good combination for an initiative. This seems like a weird and overly retributional type of ballot measure. I recommend no. And you've seen the commercials. They're very confusing. They make it seem like people are going to drop dead if you vote one way or another. In a situation like that,
Something like roaches.
I was under the impression if you vote no, if it doesn't pass, like they're going to take away all those special dialysis centers, and then all these people are going to be packed into the hospitals, which is already
right. They're making the case that if you vote yes, that it'll cause the closures of all these smaller clinics like Invita or whatever they're called, and that people will be packed into emergency rooms. There might be some truth to that. My guess is that's probably overblown. One of the downsides of these ballot initiatives is that you get TV commercials that try to scare you. They try to play on your emotions.
I know a lot of people that work in that industry.
And that's not really a healthy way to make public policy. My guess is both sides are making exaggerations. And when I feel that way, I tend to go no. I think 9 may have been taken off the ballot, so you're right. There was 11. One was taken
9
off.
was for cutting California into 3 different.
That's right. It got disqualified. I'm definitely
We're still
against
talking
that
about
one.
Right.
Well, you know, it's funny. The people that push that come back at it like 2 or 3 times every year, and I have my own strong feelings about it. I think, frankly, it's a bunch of white, rural, hick people trying to disassociate themselves with the cities and the urban centers of California.
I never thought of it that way.
It
Trying
tends
to get some more electoral
it
votes.
tends to be a real
red side.
Think about it.
sort of rural versus urban kind of thing, which always makes me nervous. I think that anyway, so it's not on the ballot, so we don't have to worry about it this time around. But I'm very resistant to that kind of thing. So that's off the ballot. Number 10 is a big one. Proposition
that's
10.
one I'm super confused.
So Proposition 10
Is it helpful or not?
is essentially a repeal of a landmark rent control, a landmark cap on rent control passed several decades ago called Acosta-Hawkins that basically locked in place cities or counties could impose rent control in California, but only through buildings that were built up through 1979. All right, so I do want to focus on Prop 10 for a moment because it is probably the biggest and most consequential measure on the state ballot this year, and also because it kind of points to some larger political things I think that are worth talking about. One is, I think it's probably on the whole negative, and I'm going to vote no on it because I think that it will be such a disincentive to create new affordable housing, new rental housing of any kind, if you limit rent on all units in the entire state of California, or at least in every community. And then the other thing is it creates price controls even on the sales of units, which price controls are always kind of a dangerous thing and not the kind of thing you want to leave to the ballot. They tend to be complicated and should be probably worked out through a legislative process. But the other thing about Prop 10 is it sort of gets at the heart of the sort of split in the Democratic Party that we have right now in the age of Donald Trump. Most of us in California, not all of us, but most of us in California are pretty anti-Donald Trump. I'm pretty virulently anti-Donald Trump. I've worked my whole life in Democratic politics. I specifically work trying to get liberal Democrats, and especially people of color and women Democrats elected.
And he's got receipts.
And so I work for Mayor Willie Brown, I work for Mayor Ed Lee, and I work for Mayor London Breed. And but I consider myself a Democrat's Democrat. Now there is a split, both here in California and around the country, on what are called Bernie-crats or social Democrats. And they're good-hearted people who believe that we should pull the Democratic Party even further to the left, even further progressive on a number of issues, and Prop 10 is a good example of that. By and large, the social Democrats, the Bernie-crats, are very strongly in support of this measure because they very much believe in rent control and think it should be applied everywhere. Now, personally, I think that the social Democrats or the Bernie-crats leave a lot to be desired because I don't think they're willing to engage in a big tent approach in the Democratic Party. As well-meaning as they may be, they often leave a whole slice of the community out there just disengaged because they don't get their issues and they speak down to them as opposed to working with people. But what I really mean is that I think that the Democratic Party can and should stand for progressive causes, for the poor, for resisting heavy militarization, for supporting schools, not jails, for police reform, all those things. I think all those things are doable within the liberal Democratic Party as opposed to the socialist Democratic circles. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from. You'll find that split down on Prop 10. You will find that the hardcore Bernie-crats are going to be all for Prop 10, and you're going to find a lot of, or what we call mainstream or liberal Democrats opposed to it. And so it's going to be a big fight. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Proposition 11 is a weird one. Another one of those that seems so narrow. Why are we voting on it? It's ambulance employees, and it basically,
commercials too.
It focuses on brakes.
Yeah.
So this has a weird.
It's very
So,
weird.
so here's where this comes from, and it's so bizarre, and we should not be voting on it. It's another abuse of the initiative system. Basically, the ambulance companies, you may not know this, but ambulances don't come from the hospitals, and except when they're part of the fire department where you live, they're not part of the city at all or the county at all. They're privately held companies, and they employ EMT workers. And there was a court case in which EMT workers tried to get better working conditions, including longer breaks and things like that. The employees won the court case. The employers, the companies, lost the court case. And so their reaction to that was to put new rules on the state ballot that sound like they're giving longer breaks because they are longer than what was required before. It's only in response to the court measure, so they're trying to cut their losses and diminish their losses. Any way you look at it, it's not the kind of thing that should be on the ballot. It's a dumb idea. Vote no on Proposition 11. It sounds good, right? Longer breaks for EMT workers. The reality
But they
is
have to be on
it's the
call.
EMT workers' bosses that put this on the ballot.
So nice try, y'all. Nice try. We see
Exactly. And then finally, Proposition 12 is another weird one with a long history. It's about farm animals. And I have to say I'm torn on this one. What this does is it creates rules for chickens, cattle, other farm animals and food production animals, egg-laying hens, that sort of thing, to provide better, more humane circumstances for them to be raised, which sounds like it's a totally good thing. Of course, we'd vote for that.
Right.
And I believe the Humane Society is for it. However, it comes as a result previous efforts at the state legislature to provide much greater and much more humane conditions for these animals, which failed, which stalled.
Okay, I see. So it's like they wanted to have them have even better conditions.
Exactly.
And they're like, this is kind of like a halfway, like, oh, but what if it was just like this?
Exactly.
So it's better than we have
And
now,
so,
but it's not
for
that
example, hens, by this measure, even though this is supposed to make things better for the animals, would be allowed to be raised in a 1 square foot space, right?
Oh, that's
And
like as big as this fireplace.
it's even less than this fireplace, and so it's probably not a good measure. It probably needs to be worked out at the state legislature, where you look at animals and conditions very differently. You phase it in over time. You do it in a much more thoughtful manner than a ballot measure. So I have to say I'm a little bit torn, because it seems like it is a slight improvement on the status quo. The problem is it might lock in that slight status quo improvement for a long, long time, when really we can do better. So I'm going to vote no.
Then no one would try and do better.
The only way to really be humane is just not eat them, which is not going to happen.
Well, there's that, but you can make free range conditions. You can do a number of things. But again, you have situations where you,
animal dying.
you know, so these things should be phased in through a deliberative legislative process, not really by a ballot measure that tends to be a hammer instead of a scalpel.
All right, so if you look at the details, it's not as good as it sounds.
Right, or it's just more complicated than it sounds, and this is, again, not usually the most nuanced way to go at these big policy issues.
Good stuff.
Well, thank you. I feel like
so
we
much.
learned a lot.
Good.
It's so much better than those damn ads.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, reading through those books because the language is so
hard.
confusing
The language
sometimes,
is
and they do that on purpose.
Right,
So,
and the ads are tough.
anything that pulls on like the heartstrings,
Yep.
that
because it's so
that's
easy.
tough. It's like,
I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
I'm on life support.
Go for it,
That's
right?
right.
yeah.
And
like
it's
you said,
difficult
you
to
have a lot of
regulate what
people
goes in an ad. You
On
can-
dialysis and in that work in the industry, so of course I feel like okay, I'm gonna vote yes.
And you can regulate and require them to reveal who paid for the ad and what's behind it, but you really can't regulate what is said in the ad. And by the time something that may not be true or maybe half true
It's too late.
is revealed, you know, it's probably too late, and you still need the money behind it to even get through to the voters. So the problem with the initiative process, the way it works in 2018, as opposed to maybe 1938, is that it is absolutely driven by who puts the money behind these ballot measures. And there's good, you know, there's people you would support on all sides, but that doesn't mean it's a sensible way to go about public policy.
Good stuff.
So let's just do a little quick summary. But let's do your recommendation.
Yeah,
I know
do-
you're split on the last one. So let's just do one.
Okay, 1 is a yes. That's housing bonds. 2 is housing for mental health patients. That's a yes. 3 is a water bond. That's a yes. 4 is children's hospital bonds. That's also a yes. 5 is the property tax transfer for people over age 55. That's a no. 6 is a repeal of the gas tax. That's a big no. Daylight savings is a lukewarm no, but you know I'm not going to hold you to it.
You can carry either way.
8 is the kidney dialysis clinics. That's a confused no. If something is too bizarre and doesn't feel like it should be on the ballot, I say vote against it. Proposition 10, number 10 is rent control. That's the biggie. That's the big one. There are good reasons for rent control to exist, especially in urban environments, but this is not a fully thought through measure. It would probably depress new housing production in the state of California, so that's a no. 11 is ambulance employees. Sounds like it's a good deal for workers. It's actually a response to a victory workers had in court, and it wasn't put on there by workers. That's a no. 12 is another one that sounds good. It makes slight improvements for farm animals, but it's not really the improvements that they need. That is a hedged no as well for me.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We feel so
So much
educated.
better. I do.
Yeah.
And I don't have to read the.
There you go. All right, so get your voter guide. You can pick up your Chronicle, or you can just listen to these later.
Well, thanks again.
All right, thank you for having me.
Where's your drink, DJ?
Cheers.
Yes. Cheers.
Cheers.
It was my pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks again, G Eazy.
Fire went out.
So there's all about white guys invited to the cookout.
Oh, he's been. He's been to
Oh, the cookout's at your house.
See you next election day.
Okay, so to be hella real, it got cold as fuck out here. Our fire died, so we even got some blankets.
Yeah, y'all know I don't deal with the cold.
Put a hoodie on.
There we go.
I'm about to put the zebra blanket on.
Zebra.
Because, you know, I'm a
She's zebra.
I'm a zebra.
Shout out to mom and dad.
Let's go get warm up.
Yeah.
So we're good. Well, I've been warming up with this.
I'm feeling great.
But that was the election episode of Hella Real. Special thank you to PJ Johnston.
Yes.
With a T, don't get it wrong. Johnston.
Johnston, thank you so much, Mr. Johnston.
Yes. And everyone get out there and vote. And like I said, we weren't telling you what to vote. We were just telling you how he would vote, knowing who he is and what he does. So y'all can do whatever with that what you want. And but for real, get out there, get to the ballots, and
Most importantly,
have your voice heard.
Very important.
We'll
so
all
we
be
could
voting.
try to get that orange.
I'm
out of the
voting
office.
G Eazy Stillhouse.